Coast. Now I know what you're thinking. Ivory Coast doesn't have the same profile as Portugal or the Netherlands. But hear me out, because this story is extraordinary. Between roughly 2005 and 2015, the Ivory Coast had what many football analysts called the greatest generation of African players ever assembled on one national team. Didier Drogba, Yaya Touré, Kolo Touré, Solomon Kalou, Gervinho, Emmanuel Iboué, Didier Zakora. These weren't just good players. These were elite players at elite clubs winning elite trophies in Europe. Drogba was Chelsea's greatest ever striker. Yaya Touré was one of the most dominant midfielders in Premier League history. They had depth, experience, and leadership. And they never got out of the group stage at a World Cup. Not once. Here's the brutal detail. In 2006, their first World Cup appearance, they were drawn into what was called the Group of Death. Argentina, the Netherlands, and Serbia and Montenegro. They finished bottom of the group. In 2010, they were drawn with Brazil and Portugal. Again, bottom. In 2014, they were drawn with Greece, Colombia, and Japan. A genuinely winnable group. They beat Japan. They beat Greece. And then they lost to Colombia and went home. The universe kept putting obstacles in their way that felt almost designed to break them. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Ivory Coast's failure at the World Cup wasn't just about bad draws. It was about a civil war. Between 2002 and 2011, Ivory Coast was split by a brutal internal conflict. And Drogba, this is one of the most remarkable stories in football history. Drogba used his platform to help stop it. After the Ivory Coast qualified for their first World Cup in 2005, Drogba gave a speech on national television, on his knees, begging the warring factions to lay down their weapons. And it worked. There was a ceasefire. A footballer helped end a civil war. And yet that same generation never won anything at a World Cup. The weight of what they were carrying, representing a nation that was literally healing itself, was immense. And they never quite got over the line. Now, let's talk about a country that's a little different from the others. A country that has produced world-class players in a completely different way. Colombia. Colombia's football story is one of the most dramatic in the world, and not just because of the football. In the 1990s, Colombian football was entangled with the drug cartels in ways that are still being uncovered. Players received death threats. Referees were bribed. And after the 1994 World Cup, defender Andrés Escobar, who scored an own goal that contributed to Colombia's elimination, was shot and killed when he returned home. One of the darkest moments in football history. But Colombia rebuilt, slowly. And by 2014, they had James Rodriguez, one of the most gifted attacking midfielders of his generation. They had Radamel Falcao, one of the best strikers in the world, who, tragically, tore his ACL just months before the tournament and couldn't play. They had a team that genuinely believed. And James Rodriguez won the Golden Boot. He scored 6 goals. He scored that volley against Uruguay that is still shown on highlight reels as one of the greatest World Cup goals ever scored. They reached the quarterfinals, and then they ran into Brazil, and Neymar, and a referee who seemed to be in a different game entirely. And they lost. Here's the fact that almost nobody mentions. Colombia has never been to a World Cup semifinal. Not once. Despite producing James Rodriguez, Falcao, Carlos Valderrama, René Higuita, one of the most creative goalkeepers who ever lived, a man who once cleared a ball with a scorpion kick against England at Wembley, in a friendly, just because he could. Despite all of this, they've never reached the Final Four. And that brings us to a country that genuinely might be the most tragic football story of all. Nigeria, the Super Eagles, a team that has qualified for 6 World Cups. A team with an incredible history of individual brilliance. JJ Okocha, a player so good they named him twice, as the saying goes, was one of the most technically gifted players of his generation. Nwankwo Kanu, Rashidi Yekini, Victor Moses, John Obi Mikel, and now Victor Osimhen, one of the most dangerous strikers in world football right now. Nigeria have never gone past the round of 16. In 1994, they were arguably the most exciting team at the tournament. They beat Bulgaria, beat Greece, and qualified from their group in style. They then faced Italy in the round of 16 and were 1-0 up with 3 minutes left. 3 minutes from the quarterfinals. And then Roberto Baggio scored. And then Baggio scored again in extra time. And Nigeria went home. It's one of the most heartbreaking moments in World Cup history. And almost nobody outside Nigeria talks about it. Here's the detail that makes it even more painful. That Italian team went on to reach the final. They only lost on penalties to Brazil. Meaning Nigeria, if they'd held on for 3 more minutes, might have gone all the way. But they didn't. And the pattern continued. 1998, knocked out in the round of 16. 2014, knocked out in the round of 16. It's like there's a glass ceiling that no Nigerian team has ever been able to break through. And the reason, when you look at it honestly, is a combination of things. Organizational chaos within the Nigerian Football Federation. Unpaid bonuses causing player strikes before tournaments. Coaching instability. Political interference. Players who are world-class at their clubs but somehow can't replicate that form in a Nigeria shirt. It's a system that keeps undermining itself at the worst possible moments. That's the theme that connects all of these countries, by the way. Individual brilliance. Systemic failure. The players are good enough. The structures around them aren't. Which brings me to the country that I think is the most fascinating case of all. Ukraine is a relatively young football nation as an independent state. They only started competing internationally in 1992 after the Soviet Union collapsed. But they produced Andrés Shevchenko, who won the Ballon d'Or in 2004 and is widely regarded as one of the greatest strikers in football history. They reached the quarterfinals of the 2006 World Cup, their first ever World Cup appearance, and lost to Italy, who went on to win the tournament. Since then, nothing. They haven't been back to a World Cup since 2006. And here's the part of the story that makes everything else feel small. Ukraine is currently playing qualifying matches for Euro 2024 and beyond while their country is at war. Actual war. Players whose families are in bomb shelters. Players who have relatives serving in the military. And they're still playing football. Still trying to qualify. Still representing a nation that is fighting for its survival. In 2022, they came agonizingly close to qualifying for the World Cup in Qatar. They beat Scotland in a playoff semi-final. And then they lost to Wales in the final. By 1 goal. And Wales went to the World Cup instead. The symbolism of that moment was almost unbearable. A country at war, trying to give its people something to celebrate, falling short by the thinnest of margins. Football, when you look at it through the lens of these countries, stops being just a game. It becomes a mirror. It reflects everything: the politics, the history, the culture, the trauma, and the hope of the people watching. Now, before we get to the end, I want to ask you something. Which of these countries do you think is most likely to finally break through? Is it Portugal, who now have a new generation building around Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva after the Ronaldo era? Is it the Netherlands, who have Virgil van Dijk, Frenkie de Jong, and a squad that looks genuinely threatening again? Is it Nigeria with Osimhen leading the line? Or is it someone else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments. Seriously, I read every single one, and this is the kind of debate that makes football the greatest sport on earth. And if you've made it this far, you clearly love football as much as I do. So hit subscribe, because we go this deep on football stories every single week. Let me bring this home. Every country on this list has one thing in common. They produce magic. Real, genuine, jaw-dropping football magic. Cruyff's total football. Eusebio's 9 goals. Drogba ending a civil war. James Rodriguez's volley. A coach's tricks. Shevchenko's clinical brilliance. These aren't footnotes in football history. These are the chapters people remember. But a World Cup final has stayed out of reach for all of them. And maybe that's what makes football so compelling. It's not just about winning. It's about the weight of expectation, the cruelty of timing, the randomness of a draw, the fragility of a lead with 3 minutes left. It's about a country at war still sending players onto a pitch because football is the one thing that makes people believe things can be okay. The countries that have never reached a World Cup final aren't failures. They're the heart of the game. They're the reason neutral fans care. They're the stories that keep people watching long after the final whistle. And here's the thing that might actually give you hope. Every single one of these countries has a squad right now that could change history. The window isn't closed, it's just waiting for the right moment. When that moment